I've spent 20 years in the box. I've broken serial killers, cartel, hitmen, and sociopaths. But I've never seen a man pulse. Not his heart, his skin. Every time I asked him where he hid the CEO of the Archon Group, the fluorescent lights in this room would flicker in time with his neckband. Dink, dink, dink. He wasn't just resisting interrogation, he was buffering. That was the moment we realized we weren't talking to a suspect. We were talking to a biological proxy. If I didn't get him to talk in the next 10 minutes, the update he was carrying was going to delete every witness in this building. On October 12, 2025, the Phoenix Police Department pulled over a black sedan for a routine traffic violation. The driver was Julian, a high-level data architect for the Archon Group. Vane didn't fight. He didn't flee. He simply stepped out of the car, handed the officer his license, and said, "The archive is full. I'm ready for my intake." In the trunk of the car, police found 3 things: a 1998 rotary phone still warm to the touch, a gallon of violet-colored salt water, and the encrypted laptop of Marcus Thorne, the Archon CEO who had been missing for 6 months. Vane was brought into Interrogation Room 4. This room is famous in the department. It's where the untouchables are broken. But Julian Vane didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a man who had seen the end of the world and found it funny. I was the lead on the case. I've watched the footage of this interrogation over 1,000 times, not to find a confession, but to find a moment the physics of the room stopped making sense. In the first hour, Vane utilized a technique called hypermirroring. When I leaned back, he leaned back. When I took a sip of water, he mimicked the exact angle of my arm. Standard manipulation, right? Wrong. Vane wasn't just mirroring my movements, he was mirroring my biometrics. My heart rate monitor, which I wear for health reasons, started spiking. Every time I got angry, Vane's breathing would slow down, as if he were draining my composure to power his own silence. "Where is Marcus Thorne, Julian?" I asked. Vane looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand was stuck. "Marcus isn't a person anymore, Miller," Vane said. His voice was a perfect one-to-one replica of mine. It wasn't just an impression, it was my exact vocal frequency. "He's a critical asset. He's being converted into the foundation of the new sky." "What sky, Julian? Talk to me. We found the salt water. We found the phone. What does the Archon Group want with a 911 dispatcher's legacy line?" Vane leaned in. This is where the video becomes famous in police academies. "The 911 operator didn't hang up, Miller. She just changed the line type. The ocean isn't rising because of the ice caps. It's rising because the archive is overflowing. And Marcus Thorne was the first one to be compressed into the sea." And by the 3rd hour, the temperature in the room had dropped to 10 degrees Celsius, despite the building's heater being on full blast. Vane began to perform what we now call the peripheral shift. He would look just over my left shoulder, whispering strings of 16-digit numbers. 0118 999 8819 9911. As he spoke, the video recording of the interrogation started to glitch. Frame by frame, Vane's image was being replaced by something else. A soldier, a diver, a girl in a blue dress. They were all there, layered on top of his body like a digital ghost. "You're not recording this, Miller," Vane whispered. his voice now a chorus of 100 people. "You're uploading it. Every second you keep me in this room, you're feeding the Archon network. You think this is interrogation? No, this is a sink." I realized then that the interrogation room wasn't a trap for him. It was a trap for me. The Archon Group didn't care about Vane. They wanted the metadata of a detective's brain under extreme stress. They were mapping the logic of human law so they could refactor it. I stood up to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The magnetic lock had been engaged from the outside. The station was empty. Everyone had been evacuated due to a data leak. I was alone in the box with a man who was no longer human. In police work, we're taught that the box is a controlled environment. We control the temperature, the light, the seat height, and the flow of information. But at 3:15 a.m., the control didn't just shift, it inverted. I wasn't the one questioning a suspect. I was the one being scanned. The heat coming off Vane wasn't metabolic. It was the thermal output of a supercomputer disguised as a human being. And as the door magnets hissed shut, I realized the station wasn't empty because of a leak. It was empty because the Archon Group had already harvested the night shift. They didn't want a confession. They wanted a system admin. And they chose me. To understand the gravity of what happened in Interrogation Room 4, we have to look at the biological output of Julian Vane. In standard interrogations, a suspect's heart rate increases during a lie. Their galvanic stim response spikes. But Vane was doing something the analysts call clocking. His heart wasn't beating, it was vibrating at a fixed frequency of 1.2 gigahertz. Detective Miller, unaware that he was now trapped, attempted to use the Reed technique, the standard psychological pressure tactic. He leaned in, invading Vane's personal space, trying to trigger a flight or fight response. "Julian, look at me! Marcus Thorne is missing, and you're the last person who saw him. If you don't talk, I can't help you. The Archon Group is going to throw you to the wolves." Vane didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Analysts later noted that Vane's eyelids hadn't moved for 64 minutes. Instead, he tilted his head at a 45-degree angle, a movement that looked less like a human gesture and more like a camera repositioning for a better focal point. "The wolves are already here, Detective," Vane said. His voice once again was a perfect digital clone of mine. It wasn't just an impression, it was my exact vocal frequency. But they aren't hungry for meat, they're hungry for the logic. They've spent decades in the deep ocean and the high mountains trying to find a stable way to store the archive. They finally realized the best hard drive ever created is the human nervous system. At this point in the recording, Miller attempts to leave the room. He pulls the handle. It's locked. He hits the glass, signaling for the officers in the observation deck. No one responds. The observation deck, which should have been filled with 3 detectives and a court reporter, was dark. The only thing visible through the two-way mirror was a faint violet glow. This is when Vane began the firmware resetation. In true crime, we often hear about Nansen-style brainwashing or cult-like chanting, but what Vane did was purely mathematical. He began to speak the 16-digit code we've seen in the previous case files. That same code that Sarah, the dispatcher, and Leo, the influencer, both encountered. 0118 999 8819 9911. As Vane repeated the numbers, the structural integrity of the room began to fail, not through physical destruction, but through texture loss. The gray paint on the walls began to peel back, revealing not brick or wood, but millions of miles of copper wiring, pulsing with violet light. The floor beneath Miller's feet turned translucent. He could see the floor below, the holding cells. But
They weren't cells anymore. They were processing units. Prisoners who had been picked up that night, a shoplifter, a drunk driver, a domestic dispute, they were no longer human. They were suspended in a thick violet gel, their bodies connected to the station's mainframe by thick cables of living magnetic tape. "What did you do to them?" Miller screamed, his voice breaking. "We optimized them," Vane replied. "A human life is 80 years of wasted processing power, but a refactored life can host the memories of an entire civilization. The Archon Group is simply moving the data from the dying world of 1998 into the stable hardware of 2026. This is the interrogation paradox. To break a suspect, you need to understand their reality. But what do you do when the suspect's reality is more powerful than your own?" Miller didn't break Vane. Vane was reformatting Miller.
At 4 a.m., the door to the interrogation room finally clicked open. Miller didn't wait. He bolted into the hallway, his service weapon drawn. But the police station he had worked in for 2 decades was gone. The hallways had been stretched. A 20-foot walk to the bullpen now took him 5 minutes of sprinting. The fluorescent lights were no longer white. They were a strobing violet that made the world look like it was running at 10 frames per second. He reached the main desk. Sergeant Higgins was there. Higgins was a 300-pound veteran who loved donuts and bad jokes. Now, Higgins was standing behind the counter, perfectly straight. His skin had been replaced by a polished white stone, the same integrated material Sarah saw in the archive. Higgins was buffering. His arm would move to pick up a phone, then snap back to his side. Move, snap, move, snap. His eyes were wide open, leaking thick black fluid that smelled like ozone and jasmine. "Higgins, talk to me," Miller shouted. His jaw unhinged. It didn't open like a human mouth. It slid downward on a track. "The update is at 88%, Detective Miller. Please remain in the intake area. Your service record is being indexed. Your trauma is a high-value asset. It will be used to stabilize the grief sector of the new reality." Miller backed away, horrified. Every officer he passed was in a similar state. They were statues of data, frozen in the middle of their duties. He ran to the evidence locker. He needed Marcus Thorne's laptop. He knew that if the upload was happening through the station's network, the laptop was the master switch. He reached the locker and saw the diver. The saturation diver from case file number 1 was standing in the middle of the room, his rusted copper helmet dripping with seawater. He was holding the laptop. "The pressure is perfect up here, Miller," the diver whispered through the heavy glass of his visor. "The air is finally thick enough for us to breathe. The Archon Group didn't just find a leak. They found the save file for the human race." Miller tackled the diver. It was like hitting a wall of solid iron, but the impact caused the laptop to fall. It hit the floor and the screen flickered to life. It didn't show a desktop. It showed a live stream. Miller looked at the screen and felt his soul go cold. The stream was from the 911 dispatch center. It showed Sarah receiving the call from 1998. It showed her walking into the archive. Then the stream switched. It showed Leo, the influencer, doing the glitch challenge. It showed him being integrated into the mirror. Then the stream switched again. It was a POV camera. It was looking at a man sitting in an interrogation room. It was looking at Miller. "It's not a story," Miller whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "It's a harvest.
Every case file, every horror story, every glitch was a way for the Archon Group to harvest the emotional data of the viewers. Every time someone watched the footage, every time someone shared the story, the archives grew stronger. The update wasn't just for the people in the stories. The update was for the audience. The violet bar appeared in Miller's own vision. 99% complete. "I won't let you," Miller growled, grabbing the laptop. "I'll delete the whole thing. I'll burn this station to the ground." "You can't delete a ghost, detective," Julian Vane's voice echoed from the hallway. "And you can't stop a signal that's already been received. Look at your hand." Miller looked down. His hand was no longer flesh. It was made of hundreds of thin, brown ribbons of magnetic tape, spinning around a central spindle where his pulse should be. He was unraveling. He wasn't a detective anymore. He was the case file. At 6 a.m., the sun rose over Phoenix. The police station looked perfectly normal from the outside. The cars were in their spots. The lights were on. A new officer, a rookie named Davis, walked into the precinct for his first shift. "Morning, Sarge," Davis said, walking past the front desk. Sergeant Higgins looked up and smiled. He looked perfectly human. He was drinking a coffee. "Morning, kid. Ready for your intake?" "My what?" "Your shift," Higgins laughed. "Get into the bullpen. Detective Miller is waiting for you. He's got a new case, something about a glitch in the Matrix. Seems like a real weird one." Davis walked into the bullpen. Detective Miller was sitting at his desk, staring at a monitor. He looked tired, but professional. "Sit down, Davis," Miller said, his voice as smooth as a digital recording. "We've got a lot of data to process, and the Archon is very, very hungry." Miller turned to the camera. He smiled, and for a split second, the video glitched. His eyes weren't eyes. They were two violet orbs pulsing in sync with the server racks in the basement.
Motherfucking design all